As many of you probably know, this is Suicide Prevention Month. Suicide is indeed Suicide Prevention Month. It is something that we want to be proactive about year round. And we know one of the ways that we can be proactive is providing all of us in the community with good tools and ideas on how we do that. So as I said, I'm so excited to have our very own Tanya Parker, who's going to be providing this information today on how to be proactive around suicide prevention. Tanya, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to provide this important information. I'm going to turn it over to you, but I will be watching the Q&A so that if anything does come up, I'll make sure and let you know.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you all for being here. This is a very important topic, and I'm very excited to share just some of the information and things that I've learned, and really kind of turn it over to you with some action steps. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. So we're just going to get started today, and we're really going to talk about some proactive steps to suicide prevention. I think this is an important topic. We hear data all the time and news stories, and I think one of the things that I learned working at NAMI is that we really need to talk about these important topics. So today I'm just going to, again, share some information that I have and kind of some tools that, that I've used that I think are really important for everyone to understand this and to be more proactive. So the very first thing I want to say is we will be discussing a very serious topic today, and it could really bring up some strong emotions, possibly be triggering for some. And so please know that you can reach out to any of these numbers that I have listed, and somebody is available 24/7. So I put these up here because the first proactive step I would like for you to take is to take out your cell phones. Unfortunately, I cannot see you, but if you would please take out your cell phone and put one of these crisis lines in your phone. That is the first step to being proactive, is to know who to call if you need assistance, especially during a crisis. So if you see,
Anya?
yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I think that if you want to try to share your screen now, you should be able to, because we're not seeing your screen just yet.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, that's kind of technology, right? We're all just.
Yeah, I was like, really thought that was happening right now. Okay, are we good?
You are good. We can see your screen and we can see all those numbers.
Okay, fantastic. Give me just a minute now to find my other screen because, okay. Sorry, we're gonna get the screen sharing. Okay. I can't tell you to put numbers in your phone if you can't see the numbers. So
yeah, we're not quite seeing your screen just yet. We were, and then we lost you.
Okay, let me try it again.
Okay.
Are you seeing it now?
I believe we are seeing your notes.
You are seeing my notes, which is not really what I want you to see. Okay. Let me change that setting very quickly. My apologies. Again, we thought it was all set up, and apparently it is.
Just so you know, folks, we always get on early and we test all the technology. So, but sometimes it still just doesn't work. So,
yeah, and I'm not really sure why that's happening. Okay, let's try one more time. Oops.
Are seeing your slide. So we're seeing your first slide.
Okay, no notes, just my slide.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you all for your patience. Now we can move forward. Now you can see the numbers. So again, The first step is to please take out your phones and please put one of these phone numbers in your phones. The reason that I say that is I think the scariest part of suicide prevention is, who do I call? What is the next step? And so please take the time to put one of these in your phone. The suicide prevention lifeline number, these are all 24/7. It provides text and conversation, also in numerous languages, and they have special access for veterans and LGBTQ. The blue one is the back of our crisis card, and not only does it have the national lines on the right, but you'll see it has the local crisis intervention teams that I'll talk about more in a bit. And then there's this crisis text line, which again is 24/7, and it is only text. And especially right now with COVID, a lot of us are in the house. Sometimes we don't have a private space to talk. And this line provides a wonderful opportunity to access information and support via text. And then of course the Trevor hotline, which is specifically for LGBTQ. And not only can you chat on the line, but you can text and you can virtually chat. So that is really the first step. Also know that if you are needing any assistance or you get emotional or need some support, please put that in the chat and Karen can send you to one of these crisis hotlines. So the first thing I'd like to do is just really talk about a couple myths and facts about suicide before we talk about proactive steps. And so I'm not really going to read these to you, but I think it's really important to understand that there are some real confusion around suicide. So a lot of times they say people who talk about suicide never attempt it, but that's not true. A majority of the time, people actually have provided clues, have asked for help, and have made statements. And so we'll talk about that a little bit in the next part of the presentation. Sometimes people will say talking about suicide with someone may give them ideas, and that's not the case. What we really want to do is to pay attention to the second myth and be reminded to not be afraid to ask. And that's one of the proactive steps we're going to talk about. So a person may be feeling overwhelmed and alone, and they just need a connection. They don't want to be isolated. So if you have the opportunity, please ask. Our third myth really talks about only certain people die by suicide, but suicide crosses all cultures, ages, ethnicities, races, and genders, including socioeconomic classes. So please just understand that there may be some higher risk factors in different populations, but suicide can affect anyone. And then there's a lot of confusion that people who attempt suicide or who make suicidal statements are overreacting to life events. And so something that I think is really ingrained in NAMI and really just about mental health in general is that we have to remember that a traumatic event is really defined by the person, not by an event. So it's really not up to us to decide what's important or impactful for another person. And so in this fact, it talks about indivisible wounds. And so there's so much more to the story. For example, there was an experience that I was assisting a family, and a young man broke up with his girlfriend, and he was very sad about it. And people thought, oh, he's just overreacting. It's young love. It's all these things. But it was very serious to him. And he actually became suicidal. And after really talking through it and him getting some assistance, there was a discovery that not only did he break up with his girlfriend, but the family made that decision because of his race. And so those wounds were really deep and a lot more than what everybody would classify it as just a teenage heartbreak. So let's make sure that we understand that when people are feeling overwhelmed, it really is true pain for them. Some people say suicide is an act of aggression, anger, or revenge. Maybe that person is trying to just hurt somebody else. But really, this myth reminds us that suicide is not about hurting other people. It's about a person hurting internally. The person's actually considering leaving because the burden is just too much. And a lot of times the statements are being made, if I leave, it'll be easier on other people, or I'm a burden to my family. And so really their thought is, if they're not around, then they won't be hurting other people. A lot of times you hear nothing's going to stop somebody once they have decided to take their own life. But really, again, and you'll see this in some of the other proactive steps that we're making, a lot of times, one question, 45 seconds, can change the trajectory of thought. So a person can be feeling very overwhelmed. And if there is a question, or if somebody actually has an intervention, it can change that thought pattern. It can release the load. A lot of times we play the Brene Brown video where she talks about empathy versus sympathy. And empathy is really a human connection. And just remember, in the previous myths, people are feeling overwhelmed. They're feeling very alone and isolated. So if somebody asks a question, intervenes, connects them, then that can kind of change the trajectory of how they're feeling and maybe move them into a more positive thought pattern. So now that we've dispelled some myths, let's take a few minutes to talk about the steps, the proactive steps that we can do. And so good news, you've already done the first one, and that's posting the crisis numbers on your phone. I would encourage you to also post them on social media and at home. In my house, I call it refrigerator art. We have lots of suicide prevention hotlines and crisis hotlines on the refrigerator. And I think this first step really relieves the anxiety of, if I ask somebody and they are in crisis, then what do? You call that number, you text that hotline, you sit with that person, and then you can connect them to professional resources. So having access to those numbers is so helpful. The other thing about those phone numbers is they also have a lot of resources on them and some great information. The second step is to learn about the warning signs and risk factors. So we're going to go over those briefly. And I just want to say that really for step number 2, I think it's really important just to understand, if this is somebody that you love, somebody that you know, it's a change in behavior. It's a change in behavior. So for example, my son was very isolated. He would stay in his room a lot. That was just kind of how he was. And then he came out very happy one morning and excited and just telling everyone how much he loved us. And then within 2 days, he was at a suicide risk. And yes, I'm sorry, did I hear? No, okay. So I think it's important to notice that the change can be from sad to happy or happy to sad, from extroverted to introverted or introverted to extroverted. So it's a sudden change, and we're going to go over those. And then be the one to ask. Be the one to ask, are you okay? Do you need help? Are you thinking about suicide? Just by asking and intervening, you can change that thought pattern and connect with somebody. And we're going to talk about how to ask, and I'm going to give you some tools. And then reduce access to lethal means. And we are not just talking about firearms. Lethal means can be cleaning products. It can be medications. So we'll talk about that real briefly and give you, again, some tools and just some very simple things that you can do that can really change number 4. And then learn more and share more. Just by being here today, you put a crisis hotline in your phone and you're already one step ahead of the game. And then whatever you learn today, share it with other people, send them to our website, give them the crisis number and have them put it in their phone. The more education we have and the more tools we have, then dealing with these crisis situations are going to be a lot easier and have positive outcomes. So let's start talking in more detail about each one of these steps. Posting the crisis numbers. So you've done that. So that's great. Post these links and crisis numbers on your social media accounts and on your refrigerator. We know that we spend a lot of time on social media, and I think it's really important for us to post helplines and crisis lines, especially right now. We are dealing with some really heavy situations. We are going back and forth with COVID. We have a lot of things weighing on us. And so posting these links and numbers is just a way to share that information. You never know who's looking at your account or reading it, who might need that number, will put it in their phone and then access it and utilize it. And then again, placing magnets and crisis cards in your home and on your phone, in your home, on your fridge, on your desk, wherever there's people. I think, again, this National Suicide Prevention Lifeline has saved many lives. And if you share this, it can save more in the future. So now you have tool number one. You have crisis lines and text lines. So what's number two? Number two is learning about the warning signs. And again, the most important part of this is a sudden change in behavior. If you notice any of these things, and anyone that you care about, please ask them, are you okay? Do you need help? I've noticed a change in you. I think if we just notice these things and we ask, just having somebody asking and making that connection, again, can change the trajectory, can change the thought pattern. We have a great card that I'm going to show you momentarily that is on our website. And it has the warning signs on one side, and then it has questions that you can ask and the suicide hotline on it. They're free, they're downloadable, you can print them, you can share them. So just take a look, just notice that. If you notice a change in somebody, if you feel that maybe something's bothering them, trust your instincts. Ask the question. Ask them if they need the hotline. So this is the hashtag for Suicide Prevention Month. Be the one to. And it's hashtag be the one to. And this is all the steps. Be the one to ask. Ask somebody if they're okay. Ask them. Ask them, do they need help? It gives you all different types of ways to ask the question. Ask them, do you want me to sit with you while I call somebody to get you help? The next step is be the one to keep them safe. And keeping them safe is sitting down with them, staying with them, making sure they're connected with help, and that the crisis has reduced and they're grounded and they have a safe place to be. So keeping them safe is simply being in their presence or staying on the phone with them until you know they've connected with that lifeline. Staying on the computer until you know that they've, again, connected with the text line or the chat line. And then be there. Being there is really, again, being present, asking, checking in, just making sure that you notice that there's a change and that you actually are making the effort. Yes, Karen.
Yeah, I just real quick, a great question came through that I wanted to share with you because I think it's a good one to address. How do you know the difference between normal teenage mood swings and suicidal mood swings?
That is a great question. Thank you, Karen. And thank you to who asked that question. I think really it's kind of the extreme. So for example, I like to use my son. He's always my example. He knows this too. So my son was kind of an introverted child. So he spent a lot of time in his room. He would come out and have dinner. And a lot of times people were like, oh, it's just teenage. And it was, it was kind of a teenage funk that he was in, right? He kind of stayed in his room and was very introverted. But what changed in him, two things. He stopped bathing. He stopped eating. He even stopped playing video games. He stopped doing the normal activities that he would engage in, and he just laid in bed. So that was one extreme. The other extreme was kind of what I talked about, where again, he was very introverted. He spent a lot of time in his room, but then the next thing I knew, he was happy and telling us how much he loved us and what great parents we were, and hanging out in the living room. And so it was a big change. It really is. You will notice again, it's kind of drastic or it's different. Teenage woes are teenage woes. But I think it's kind of that extreme. So again, If you have a child who's introverted and in their room and they're playing games and they don't really come out, that's fine. But then if you notice that their hygiene stops, that they're not playing games, they're not on the phone talking to their friends, that's when it becomes a concern. So I hope that answered your question. I'm going to go back now. So we were talking about being there, which again could be on the phone or just being in their presence, just sitting with them, and then help them connect. That's the crisis line. That's the number that's in your phone. That's saying, you know, can I call somebody for you, or can I sit here while you talk to somebody? That connection is going to really be the foundation for changing things, for really giving them the opportunity to be in a safe place and talk about how they're feeling. And then maybe getting some resources, maybe saying, oh, now I need to go talk to somebody long-term, or maybe I need to just go talk to my family. And then follow up. And I know that sometimes this is hard, but I think it's very important, especially now, because we, again, still feel kind of isolated. But follow up. If you sat with somebody and made this call, reach out to them in a day or a week. Are you doing okay? Do you want to have a cup of coffee if it's somebody you know? Do you need anything else? Would you like to go on a walk, or would you like to just connect on Facebook or Instagram or FaceTime? So we always want to follow up and make sure not only that the crisis is over, but they've stayed connected with the services. This is the suicide assessment card that I was talking about. This is on our webpage. And I just wanted to really talk to you about the fact that it has how to assess if people need help. It talks about kind of those 5 steps that I just went over. And then on the back, it actually has the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale. This scale is evidence-based. It took years to produce, but it's simple questions. Simple questions. Not only is it simple, but it has the words, so you can actually ask it exactly like it's printed. And then it tells you when the person is at high risk, and then it gives you the numbers to call. This is an invaluable resource, and I think it's really important that you can either put this in your phone as well, or that you have the ability to pull this out and just maybe ask these questions. It tells you step by step what to do. And real quickly, I just wanted to say the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, there's an actually free training that you can use. But this is developed for anyone to use. This is not a tool that you have to be a therapist to use. They developed this so anyone can ask these questions and then rate and connect somebody at high risk. So I think that this is, again, it's simple. It's right here in front of you. It's direct, and it has the steps. Also know that this is the scale that is used by mobile outreach team and the local mental health authorities. And so you're actually using a scale that is used throughout our community. So reducing access to lethal means. The key to this is time and distance. So we want to put time. So time between when the person says, I don't want to be here anymore, to where they could actually find some kind of lethal means. And we want to put distance. And the distance is distance in accessing. How long is it for them to find, and how easy is it for them to access lethal means? And what is lethal means? So if you look, it could be firearms. It could also be medications. It can be cleaning products. And so all that we ask is that you secure all of these items. So there's a safety lock. Your firearm is unloaded, or it's stored in a locked cabinet. The medications are secured that you're using. So in other words, they're in a cabinet, or they're in something that is inside of a cabinet. So it takes maybe 2 or 3 steps to actually get to the medications. If you have old medications, that you use the proper disposal times to go and get rid of them so you don't have extra medications. And then securing cleaning supplies. Now, when we had young children, we had locks on our cabinets, but we really want to put these in a place where it's not easy for people to access them. So maybe in a garage on a shelf somewhere, or again, in a cabinet. The longer it takes for somebody to find lethal means, it lowers the risk of them actually using it. And again, time. So how long does it take, again, for them to find lethal means? So we just want to make sure that if somebody is having a crisis, that they can't just easily pick up a lethal means and utilize it. These are simple things, all things that we probably all do every day, but it's just an extra step to take. There is an actual training called Counseling or Conversations about Access to Lethal Means. It was developed by Dr. Frank, and it also has a free training that's available on the websites that we'll give you. It's a great training, super easy to take, but it really just not only talks about how to store and secure items, but it again goes over the steps that we're going over today and how to have conversations. And then learn more and share more. So we have all kinds of free trainings. Some of them I mentioned. So your local mental health authority, which is a state mandated health authority. For Travis County, it's Integral Care. For Williamson County, it's Bluebonnet Trails. They actually offer mental health first aid and Ask to Save a Life for free. You can also access most of these trainings. Actually, you can access all of these: Ask to Save a Life, Mental Health First Aid, and the Counseling on Access to Lethal Means. They're all available free on different websites. You can take them. It will let you practice. It will give you the foundation. It will really help you feel comfortable in understanding how to intervene in a crisis. And then, of course, NAMI, we have free classes. Lots of educational webinars like this one. We have the suicide prevention card. We have a suicide assessment card and all kinds of resources on our website. Everything that is listed here is free and available online. Another thing that we can do is learn suicide safe language. A lot of this information, again, is on the websites that we will provide to you. It's really important to use safe language. We don't want to say things like successfully completed suicide. We want to make sure that the language that we're using not only is safe, but really doesn't put blame on the victim. Attend a local suicide prevention coalition meeting. There's a great Texas Suicide Prevention Coalition website. Again, it has a lot of these trainings on it. They provide lots of free webinars, information, but there's a lot of county coalitions. They meet regularly. They provide free trainings. They talk about different ways to share information. They're very active in the legislature, and they're always looking for great ways to connect with PTAs, to connect with community organizations, just to share this information, provide resources and education. And then share this information with your community, share it with your faith-based community, share it with your children's school. Just make sure that everyone is comfortable and understands that suicide is preventable, and that with these 5 easy steps, we can really save some lives and support people who are struggling. And so with that, this is our phone number and our website. Again, I appreciate your time today, and if there are any questions, I will be happy to take them at this time.
Just a reminder that you can drop those questions either into the chat box or to the Q&A, either one. I see, Tanya, that someone's asking about suicide in very young children.
Yes. And so one thing I think that we need to remember is some of these things look very different in all different age groups. And so a lot of times um, it's really about maybe putting themselves in harm's way. So sometimes um, you'll hear things about small children either being harmed while they're playing, or risky behaviors like running into the street. Sometimes little kids will even say that they just don't want to be here. And so that actually is happening. And I think we've are working really hard to kind of identify that and find different ways for intervention. So um, please know that that does happen. And I think it's just, again, a change in behavior, um, and just really watching kind of how kids are talking and some of the things they say, especially things like, I don't want to be here anymore, or my family would be better without me. Um, Nobody likes me. And I know sometimes that seems like it's kind of a typical response, but just kind of understand where it is in the context of things, especially if there's a change in behavior or appearance um, of the small child. Actually, the CSSRS, which is that scale rating, that's on our card. There's actually specific questions for kids who are 10 and under. So there's very specific questions and different screening tools that you can use for small children. And again, all accessible and free on that website.
Okay, Tanya, I'm also seeing, let's see. If a student says, I used to have suicidal thoughts, what is the time limit considered to still be concerned? 3 months ago, a month ago? And then this person, then the person that asked the question about young children just said that they should have qualified, that they were looking at ages 9 to 13. So want to address the question though about a student saying, I've had some suicidal thoughts, and how that might be addressed.
Sure. And so if somebody says that they have had previous suicidal thoughts, I feel like that's something to take note of. But it also sort of, it raises concern if you notice a change in their behavior. So the risk of them possibly attempting suicide is higher because they've had previous suicide thoughts. So I can say you should be concerned about them, but just continue to take notes again if there's a change in behavior, and do not feel timid or afraid to ask the question, because they're sharing that with you. So you must be a very trusted person if they're giving you that type of information. And if somebody says that, you can always say, well, are you feeling like that now? Or have you recently had thoughts of suicide? So I think it's important just to have that open conversation, especially if somebody has now shared that with you, which is a very personal and private matter. That's them opening that door to kind of start that conversation again. I don't think there's a timeline as far as when to be concerned and not be concerned. I just think that conversation needs to continue to happen.
Thank you, Tanya. Another question that has come up is, what are common misperceptions with language that isn't safe? And I don't know if maybe the person that, if maybe you can give us a little more information, because I'm not exactly sure. I think I know what you're asking, but
Right.
If you don't mind giving us.
Yeah, I'm going to talk for just a second why maybe they're clarifying that.
Yeah, she just said, elaborating on what is safe language. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you, Erica. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment because I think it'll be easier for me to see as well. So I think it's important to understand when they talk about safe language, it's really just trying to not blame the person who is struggling. It's also trying to remove the responsibility. And so I think some of those myths also talk about the language. And so again, completed suicide, like it's a positive thing that that person completed suicide. It's just, there's just certain little, and it's ever changing, right? It's ever changing. So I think we just need to be careful that we're not blaming the person who was struggling. So we don't want it to seem like it was a positive thing that they're not around anymore, or that they were trying to punish their family. And so there's a whole page on that in the Suicide Prevention Resource Center. And again, it's just things to look at. I don't feel like a lot of people use inappropriate language. I just think that if you identify somebody who is, maybe understanding why that would create a negative perception of the person who was struggling. Yes, the ass training, I see that.
And then I don't know if you spotted, someone else just said, a husband of a suicidal wife continues to argue that everything is a choice. And if she chooses suicide, it's her fault, not his. How do you make the husband see his argument is flawed and save the wife?
That is a really tough question. I can see, okay, I'm looking at it. Wow. So I think when we're talking about suicide, of course, we do talk about mental health and that it's a health condition. And having a mental health condition is not a choice. Having diabetes is not a choice. So I feel like when somebody is struggling, again, it's not a choice. And so if that husband, if his wife had cancer, would he say if she's not treating her cancer, she should pass away because that's her choice? Also trying to get him to understand that she is feeling overwhelmed, and that she is struggling, and that she's hurting. And so there's pain involved there. Again, I think this goes back to the myth of, she's just doing it to get attention, or maybe he's thinking she's not taking care of herself, or she's, maybe she's trying to punish him in some way. And so if you go back to those myths, we really just want him to understand that this is something that is treatable. This is something that can move her into a positive place in her life as a whole. And that maybe feeling connected and not feeling like she's being punished, or that there's a stigma around her because things are feeling too heavy. That is a really tough place to be in. I would definitely say if you can connect with the wife, to give her some help, even the crisis numbers that's beyond her husband. And then maybe even trying to send him to one of these one of the websites, the Suicide Prevention Resource Center, or just some kind of educational places. Even NAMI, we have some great educational pieces that people can understand more about mental health conditions. My son has diabetes, and I would never say that it was a choice, and he's struggling in his life, and he could potentially die because he's not taking care of his diabetes, and that's his choice. This is, again, a health condition that needs to be treated. It needs to have some empathy, and people need to know that it's not a choice, that she truly is feeling overwhelmed, and it's her perception, and it's real. And I hope that helps. That was a very difficult question, but thank you for asking that. Do we have any other?
I'm not seeing any other questions, either in the Q&A or in the chat. And we're sort of right on time then, because it's like 11:56. So we'll give you a couple of minutes here to drop any other information or questions you might have, but otherwise, we certainly want to thank you, Tanya, for the great information that you provided today and for the examples that you provided as well.